Yeah, where I started with this, Ian, was about 10 years ago. I had been chasing FDR and his mystic guru named Nicholas Roerich around Mongolia as they were looking for the reincarnated Jesus and the secrets of the Holy Grail at a place called Shambhala, which has as its center a place called Mount Meru, which is the ladder or stairway to heaven, the axis to heaven in the east. And I found this diagram of Mount Meru, which is on the coast-to-coast site this evening. And I was giving a presentation on the subject once, and a scientist came up to me and said, that's a blueprint for a particle accelerator. And I had no idea what a particle accelerator was at that time, nor had I visited one, but I followed up on his suggestion, and lo and behold, that's exactly what this diagram from the 2nd century in China could actually be, is a rod-like particle accelerator, an instrument that high-energy physicists use today to smash particles together so that they can learn the ultimate secrets of matter. And in fact, I was recently in touch with a PhD in physics who is the sort of the big brain, if you will, at one of the major weapons contractors in the United States. And I got his comments on the diagram, and he in detail told me exactly why this diagram from the 2nd century can be interpreted as a particle accelerator. So starting from that place, I just asked the question, is it possible that the ancients did possess this kind of sophisticated consciousness that could breed this kind of technology? And the answer seems to be yes, they did.
Well, what did they use it for? I mean, it sounds like the ancients like inventing a electric washing machine without something to plug it into.
Well, they inevitably did have power sources, people believe. The Great Pyramid, for example, is considered to be a giant power plant. What they used it for is as a ladder or stairway to heaven. But here's the interesting thing about it. When you look at, for example, the diagram of Meru, the ladder to heaven from 2nd century Mongolia, or China rather, you look at it, it clearly resembles a human spinal cord and a vertebrae system. And what you recognize is that it appears they were making a connection between this technology out here and what is contained within our body. And so if we begin to think of our body as this actual technology, we see how the ancients actually used it. Many of these ancient cultures had a belief in something that we have kind of lost touch with, and that's the idea that within us we have something they referred to as the divine spark or the divine particle. The philosophers called it the philosopher's stone. And this is an aspect of ourselves that lays dormant until we begin the process of schooling or educating ourselves, initiating ourselves, if you will, in the esoteric secrets of our body. And what they claim is that our body is to be utilized for by this divine spark is a ladder or stairway to heaven. And what we're charged with doing is learning how to activate these latent capabilities within our body and use the body as a conductor between heaven and earth.
Okay, well, take me through that a little bit more, though. What is it that would happen? Typically, how would you enter into one, or what would be was this for the implementation or the implanting of a divine spark, or was this an extraction device? I mean,
yeah, that's a very good term, Ian. I think of it as an extraction device, that what you're going to utilize the body for is the mechanism that can open a gateway into the heavenly realms. And this is why in so many instances, for example, I cite the transfiguration scenes and ascension scenes of Jesus, where he's being held aloft by angels, and behind him is a tunnel of concentric rings. When you look at those images, you see Jesus in his transfigured form as a being of light, which is the first step towards opening these gateways, and then you see the gateway behind him. And what is inferred in these images is that he has apprehended or utilized the body as a technology for lifting the divine spark into the heavenly realms. In fact, this is that controversial gospel, the Gospel of Judas, which just came out earlier this year, makes it explicit that the Savior to the Gnostics was not the physical body of Jesus. The Savior to them was considered what they refer to as the divine spark or the divine particle within Jesus, and the body is a simple covering for that divine particle.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of different Gnosticisms, and I always have to feel like we have to be clear about that. There were in many cases as many denominations, if you will, of Gnosticism as there are, today amongst Christians. There wasn't always continuity, but one of the main ones were those who saw the human body as a kind of a meat sack around this divine spark. And that this was, as you talked about before, the kind of a process that we're going through where we're reconnecting something which at one time had been our birthright, a kind of divine mind that we had that was connected all the time. What do you see, though? I mean, take us through, like, maybe what would be sort of a step-by-step process of one of these divine extractions. I mean, what do you think happened? I mean, as you investigated, as you imagine it, what happened?
Well, I have a DVD presentation available on my site called The Light Body Effect. And in that presentation, I walk the viewer, to the best of my ability, through this process. And actually, based on my own intuition linked with some Tibetan research, I came up with a formula. It's very simple. It's imagine it, believe it, live it. The Tibetans teach that in order to begin this process, you first have to be able to imagine it. You have to imagine that your body is, in fact, in a pupal form right now, and that there is a higher being within you, referred to as the divine spark or the divine particle. And step one is imagining that and being able to connect with it. You also want to be able to imagine using visual cues. And remember, all of these teachings are taught purely in visual terms. There are no books that teach you how to do this. It was always transmitted orally and in pictures.
Do you have an example of that? I mean, do you have of what you tell people to try to get them to be that imaginative? Not everybody, I think, have that vocabulary that kind of jumps to mind.
That's why I use so many slides and depictions in my work. One of the key sources for this is a gentleman named Ian Baker. He wrote a book called The Dalai Lama's Secret Temple. Turns out behind the Potala Palace in Lhasa is the Dalai Lama's secret temple, and inside this temple is a mural, a 360-degree mural that depicts this process in full color of the transmutation or transfiguration, beginning with the initiate in his human form, transfiguring into what they call the rainbow body, the vortex of energy. And so by being able to follow these visual cues, the idea is that your imagination is triggered. The next step, the Tibetan said, is that you have to accept that this is our divine state and stay in that place. In other words, you have to believe it. And then the third step is to actually live your life with the expectation, the hope in your heart that you are going to be transformed into a being of light, and then live that way. So imagine it, believe it, live it is the three-step process to simplify it.
Let me ask you more specifically. If you were to give somebody, say, do you ever do meditations in which you explicitly try to give the language that somebody should use to create that imagination?
I'm starting to more and more, Ian. For years, I've viewed myself as the person pointing people to the door, so to speak.
Right.
I'm not a guru. I haven't affected this transmutation myself. The Dalai Lama would certainly be more prepared to teach you about it than I am. What I am doing is weaving these traditions together and painting a picture, an open-eye meditation, if you will, of this is the highest form that we see in tradition after tradition, whether you're looking in Egypt, Tibet, Christian symbolism, it doesn't matter. They all show their highest beings in exactly the same form. And that form is in their rainbow body, in their energy body, their light body. And the message that goes with it is, this is where you're going. This is where you're headed. This is what you want to focus your life on. In fact, in the Pistis Sophia, which is one of the most famous Gnostic documents, Jesus tells Mary Magdalene and the other disciples that the explicit purpose of our life is to find the purifying mysteries that will transform us into a being of pure light, so that we can go on height and inherit the light of the kingdom, which I interpret as the garden of hundreds of billions of galaxies that inhabit the known universe. But might well be the other 95% of the universe that's still dark to us.